Welcome back, folks. I am John Najarian, and on the Rebels Edge today, we're going to cover several stocks that have had unusual activity. What's that? Stay tuned, and we'll tell you. Bang! Well, without further ado, Pete, how about if we jump into the macro minute, shall we?
Let's do it.
Macro minute is that we've still got the big earnings in front of us. So it's Tuesday. The market's making a nice upside move, recovering after 6 straight down days. But now we're seeing a little bit of a recovery, Pete. So I'm saying macro minute, we'll see what those big earnings are from Meta and Google and Microsoft, and whether they can hold it up or push it down.
I totally agree with you, John. I think the biggest thing that we face is the earnings. And earnings season is always something that is market moving. But I think this particular one, after the huge quarter we had in Q1, now we got Q2. We've got Tesla, we've got Meta, we've got Google, we got Microsoft, we've got Boeing, we've got Merck, we've got Chevron, we got Caterpillar. I mean, this is about as big a week as you could find.
Yeah, it sure is, folks. And that's why it's the big part of the macro minute. All right, let's dive into fantastic futures.
I don't think you're going to see them.
Well, fantastic futures. Coffee correction may be underway, Pete, but if it is indeed a correction, do you think we're going to see anybody at Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts, or Tim Hortons cutting coffee prices?
That's a good call. I think for my fantastic futures, John, I'm going to hit gold because it wasn't too many days ago, and literally days ago, that gold was over 2,400. I think it hit over 2,414 or something like that. And now we've taken a tumble of nearly $100. So here we are down in the 2330 area. It's going to be interesting to see. Can it hold on? Silver's pulled back a little bit off of highs too, but gold is certainly pulling back significantly from those highs in just a couple of days.
Yeah, a couple of days probably doesn't make a full correction, but it's good of you to note it, Pete. And both gold and silver had made pretty interesting corrective move yesterday, and they're following through on that, I guess, again today. Yeah. All right, now let's get into the stocks, Pete, because JetBlue, we have earnings from JetBlue. The stock is down hard today, JBLU, and we had unusual activity in it just yesterday, Pete. They were betting that the stock would be down. It's now down, or it was just a little bit ago, down some 15% before we came on air, and they were buying puts. So if you want to profit from what is about to happen, I think unusual activity is the way to do it.
Yeah, there's no doubt UOA has been fantastic, especially 2024. It just seems like we've had better than we have seen any year before that. It's just incredible. And I think a lot of that has to do with the volumes that have been moving into the derivatives world. We're seeing it with the options. We have huge volumes. We're averaging over 48 million contracts a day. So clearly, we just keep on growing, John. But when I look at JetBlue, it really came down to the guidance. They have a lot of different issues, I think, going on, down 16, 17% today. That's a stock that's getting hammered, as you were pointing out. The losses continue to be a little bit less than expected, maybe, but they're still losses, and that's a major problem. They talk about some of their issues that they've got, especially in South America and so forth. So there's a lot of different things that are going on, a lot of disappointment that we're seeing from this one after seeing good numbers from names like, United and Delta and some of those names earlier that gave us some pretty good outlook. This is not one of them with JetBlue.
Yeah, and I suppose some of that, Pete, is probably because of the deal, being broken up between them and Spirit and so forth. So again, we're going to keep our eyes on this, folks, but it's nice that some people sort of tip us off with this unusual activity. And guess what? They did the same thing in Xerox, Pete. XRX earnings and guidance. Well, we had put activity and it's down 9% today. Again, stocks to see a 9% gain might, in many cases, take you days and weeks or even months, but still like that, this is an example of stocks take the stairs up and the elevator down, Pete. And free cash flow, negative 89 million. That's lower by 159 million year over year. So yeah, this is not a good report for XRX.
No, XRX looking terrible, John. Their revenue is down 12.5% year over year. You mentioned the cash burn of nearly $90 million. That's not good. Their earnings, they lost 94 cents. They were looking for a loss of 35 cents. I mean, there's nothing you could point to where you'd say, you know what, maybe this thing's worth taking a shot. Even though the stock is down near the lowest level in 52 weeks, 12 to 20 is the range. It's down there near 14 last I looked. I still don't know that, John, that there's a reason to say, you know what, maybe it's bottomed out. They had weak guidance for the full year. I think that says it all. I think this is one of those names you've got to avoid.
Yeah, it's not on my buy list either, Pete. All right, let's talk about a firm. So this is buy now, pay later. It's a way some people have been able to get around their credit card issue because Americans are putting an awful lot on credit cards, Pete. But guess what? Walmart has a big competitor called One. And that fintech named One now has a buy now, pay later scheme that they're rolling out basically for Walmart and others. And initially it had a firm down 8%, but that turned around, Pete. And now it's actually up 3% on the day. Our pal Mark Lepresti made sure that he reached out to me to say, hey, it's not down, it's up. And I'm like, well, it was down, Mark, and now it's up. But he was going through the tunnel, and in the time it took him to go from Jersey to Manhattan, it had reversed, Pete. And that's why we're talking about it on the upside now.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I mean, when you look at just about everything about a firm, John, it is still one of those names where, okay, what have you done for me lately? Because I understand this turnaround that you were just talking about, but you still got about a 10 to 14% short interest there. You're burning cash at a pretty incredible rate. Your debt to cash is $4.5 billion. You're near year-to-date lows, at least earlier today when the stock was getting beaten down to the downside. And there is competition out there. And I think that's the one thing that maybe I'm taking away from this whole thing is they're not alone out there with this buy now, pay later deal. Obviously, there are other competitors out there, including One, who, by the way, Walmart has a majority stake in that as well. So there's a lot of reasons why I think that if I was looking at this one, I think a firm is doing okay. They've got to show us that they can make money on a consistent basis, which they have not been able to do. And so for that reason, John, I'm looking at Walmart, and we know what Walmart's been able to do. A lot of amazing things, actually, since the pandemic. They really have been pushing forward. And if they've got investment like they do in One, I just wonder, when does that start to expand a little bit bigger, and maybe they do push completely away from a firm? I'm not saying that's going to happen soon, but it certainly could be something in the future.
And Pete, they have earnings on 5/8. Okay. In other words, May 8th. So that's only a couple weeks out, a little over a week out. I'm very interested to see what kind of conversation they have about One and its potential to knock them out of the box at the biggest retailer in America, Walmart. Yep. All right, Pete, Spotify. Let's talk about that. Shares were up 10%. Double digits, and all of a sudden 12, 15, 20%. It's holding on to about a 16% gain, Pete. Premium subscriber growth up 14% year over year. So that's a huge move by Spotify. And a lot of people reached out when they signed Joe Rogan and made a number of other strong acquisitions to their talent pool and said, well, that's it for Spotify. Apparently not so fast. Spotify's doing just fine, I guess.
Yeah, not only are they doing just fine, but then their guidance was strong. So everything you're looking for in earnings, released, this is it. Gross margins, well, they were 25%, now they're 29% in Q1. Everywhere you look, and you pointed out the growth, how about the the monthly active users, that was a growth of 19% year over year. But like you said, the premium buyers, now that's a really big number, 239 million of those users. So they're up 14%. Everything you would want out of an earnings call, I think Spotify came with, and they absolutely blew it out. So that was really, really impressive. I'm impressed by what they were able to do. If this stock isn't going to go up on a day like today, which it is, I think it's one of those stocks that this one you want to be in. You want to be looking for, how do I enter into it? And maybe that comes on a day where the markets are getting pushed to the downside and Spotify gets carried down with them. Maybe that would be an opportunity to at least start a position going into it. Maybe you're not chasing it on a day like today, but this is certainly a really, really impressive day for them. Oh, and by the way, 52-week highs for the stock at 315. Not so bad.
16 million new monthly active users, like Pete was saying, folks. That's a reason to be looking at this one and looking at it hard. Also, a 20% increase in their premium revenue, which, you know, depending how you listen to Spotify, folks, you can, of course, listen to the free version or pay for the premium version, and a 20% increase in the paid side. That's huge for these guys because it proves that their strategy's working.
Right.
All right. Well, Pete, unfortunately, I know you're going to rip one of my Chicago teams, and for a change, it ain't the Bears. So tell me what you got as far as sports.
Hey, man, I've actually liked what the Bears have done. So I'm in that camp. They've done a lot of really, really good things in the offseason, free agency. And if their quarterback works out that everybody thinks is the best guy in the draft, well, maybe they got a place to go. You know who doesn't have a place to go anywhere? It's the Chicago White Sox. John, I've never seen a team look this bad. And so I started looking into it, trying to figure out, okay, well, when's the last time anybody was even close? And you really can't find that either, by the way. 2003, Detroit, they won a total of 43 games. Well, at the pace that's going on right now for the Chicago White Sox, they have no chance at making 43 games. I mean, it's not even in any kind of cards, John. They're 3-19 right now. Now, I know it's early, but you can do the multiplication and go to the 162 games and figure out what the pace is right now. It ain't 43 games. They've got major problems, John. They've got 11 total home runs. 11. There's two players right now in Major League Baseball that combined for 17 home runs, and the Chicago White Sox have 11. I mean, that's pretty bad. 42 total RBIs. That's really bad. I mean, everywhere you look at the runs scored, they've scored 45 runs. How many have they given up? 123. I mean, there's nothing that you could point to right now where you'd go, yeah, but. there is no yeah, but, because the yeah, but might have been, well, but they're playing the Minnesota Twins, who don't look all that great right now early on in the year either. Although they beat Chicago yesterday, they're likely going to take them in the next few games together. It's one of these things, John, where they just don't seem to have it right. Now, I don't know what the problem is, other than to say they can't get runs, they can't stop people from getting runs, and they can't hit very well. Their home runs at 11 is pretty pathetic when you've got two guys out there who are almost there on their own, but surpass them substantially when you combine them. I mean, I don't know how to explain anything other than maybe they need to go back to those days where they decided they were going to burn a bunch of disco records, John. I don't know. What do you think? What's wrong with these guys?
Get the Savannah Bananas up there, Pete. That's what I think.
They're a better team.
Yeah. I went back even further than Pete, folks, because Pete's talking about Major League Baseball on the more accepted high level of Major League Baseball when he says Detroit had 43 wins and that's the worst. And the Sox are certainly on pace to break that record. But the all-time records, Pete, I thought you'd get a kick out of this. All-time record, 20-134. Oh. That was the Cleveland Spiders. We all remember the mighty Cleveland Spiders in
those guys were good.
1889. Warren Buffett was still alive, so he probably remembers that, Pete. How about this? The Pittsburgh Alleghenies, 23-113. The Louisville Colonels in 1890 27 and 111. The St. Louis Browns, 29 and 102. That was 1897. And then the Washington Nationals, 28 and 92 in 1886. Yeah, Major League Baseball's been around a long time, folks, and a lot of those teams I described aren't. And I think those records kind of tell the story of why they're not around anymore.
Yeah, I went just to the modern era because I didn't think it was fair to go too far back because they didn't play 162 games back in the day. You know, they played less games and all that kind of thing. But boy, they're pretty awful, John. They really are. I mean, when you some of those stats I threw out, even I had to check them. I'm like, God, is that really right? I mean, you know, their run differential is minus 78 when I was going through those numbers. That's pretty pathetic. Next up, John, we're going to go. I know that people probably say, why do these guys talk so daggone much about the NFL or maybe even college football? Here's why. We both used to play it. We both played in college. We both played in the NFL. We both have a lot of ties to a lot of different sports. But, you know, NFL is the biggest, baddest that there is, especially in North America. And they're going to get bigger around the rest of the globe. That's why they play in places like Germany and London and somewhere in France. And now they're going to go to Brazil, whatever. I mean, they're going all over the place. I played in the World League of American Football. I understand that one as well. So the growth that they're trying to develop around the world, they're trying to compete with soccer and some of those others. Anyway, John, the draft is coming up Thursday, and I thought it would be kind of fun. So I took out two teams that I think are really absolutely have done what they should have done to get themselves into position to be a hell of a lot better this year than last year. So one of them is the Atlanta Falcons. Now, I bring them up because they didn't have a quarterback. That becomes a major problem, right? In the NFL, we always say, what do you got to have? What do you have to have? You got to have a quarterback. And the Texans, they went out and got themselves a quarterback last year. They also went out and got themselves another guy, Defensive Player of the Year, rookie Defensive Player of the Year, and Will Anderson. Well, that's not so bad. And then all of a sudden you decide, well, you know what? We're going to get Danielle Hunter, the fastest man ever to get to 50 sacks in the NFL, and we're going to put him on one side, and we got Will Anderson on the other. We're going to get Joe Mixon to run the ball. We're going to get Stephon Diggs to catch the ball. And we got C.J. Stroud already, who is an absolute superstar that people are absolutely loving in his first year. So you've got that at the Texans. And then you look over at Atlanta and you go out and get Kirk Cousins. Now, a lot of people don't believe in Kirk Cousins. I'm okay with that. But you should look at the numbers because the numbers don't lie. And Kirk has had a really good run with the Minnesota Vikings. Now he's going to his hometown of Atlanta, at least his wife's hometown. You've got Bijan Robinson, John, as your running back. You've got Kyle Pitts as your tight end, first-round pick. Drake London, you know the idea. And then they've got, of course, the draft. And they've got some players that they're going to go for. They've got the number 8 and the number 11 in the second round. So they're going to get some really quality players, I think. So I look at Atlanta and I look at the Texans. I don't think they're just going into the playoffs. I think they could maybe both make a deep run into the playoffs this coming year. What do you think of that? And do you have any other teams, or do you like those two teams to see the improvement that they've been able to do through free agency and probably through the draft?
Yep. Well, obviously the Texans through the draft and free agency, just as you described, Pete. Nobody wants to see them on their schedule this year. Even though I'm sure some of you out there will say, yeah, John, but you know, the freshman quarterbacks, rookies, people tend to be able to defense them the year after because they've had a whole bunch more film to look at on how to defend them. I don't know how you defend a guy that's as accurate as C.J. Stroud, Pete, versus, some of the other folks that are on the roster on other teams. I think this is going to be a great Texan run this year, maybe even to the Super Bowl. And I thought it was just kind of interesting, Pete, that Matty Ice, Matt Ryan from the Atlanta Falcons, formerly, he signed a one-day contract just so he could retire as a Falcon. Yeah. And that's kind of a classy move by him, by Arthur Blank. I believe that's his name, Pete, the owner of the Falcons, because he threw for 367 touchdowns. I mean, this guy, if his defense could have played ball at all in the second half, against Brady in that Super Bowl where they went up huge on him and then, gave up the ghost. That kid would be wearing a Super Bowl ring. And is he going to be in the Hall? Probably not. Even with 367 touchdowns, Pete, he'll be in the Falcons Hall of Fame, and he was a tremendous competitor for them. But Atlanta has to dial it up, Pete, and maybe they've got enough down there. They certainly have one of the biggest stadiums in the league. Beautiful. So if they can put more people in those seats, more butts in the seats, Pete, they can pay for it. And I would open up the wallet and get a bunch of free agents as well as draft picks, because ATL should be a great place for young players to make a name for themselves. And for some of those veterans, put them in there as well. And all of a sudden, I think you've got a good combination.
I completely agree. I like both though. I like what they're doing in the offseason. I think it makes them a lot better. I think the Raiders have done a really good job in the offseason to get a lot better. They retained the coach. They got a new quarterback. They got Gardner Minshew. I mean, they've done a lot of really good things. I think there are some teams that have made the right moves. I'm not so sure about a team that just continues to stumble around like the Denver Broncos, John. I can't figure those guys out. They got a lot of money from Walmart, but money doesn't always get you.
You don't like the Zach Wilson trade?
Oh, God. I mean, honestly, maybe there's a chance for it. Maybe he just needs a new place. I don't know. But think about this, John. That guy was what? Maybe the third or fourth or fifth pick in the draft when he came out. Whatever it was, it doesn't matter. He was way up there. And what did they get in return? I think they got a 6th-round pick. I mean, honestly, think about that. It's just amazing how wrong some of these teams have been when they've reached up for these quarterbacks. And there are other quarterbacks that have stepped in, like Brock Purdy, and they walk in there and they're superstars. So it is a difficult position, I think, to get the right analysis on. But sometimes these guys just see what they want to see. And I'm still in that camp with Caleb Williams.
Yeah, I am too, Pete, because think how sold the Jets were on Zach Wilson. I mean, just completely sold on him, just like a lot of people are completely sold on Caleb Williams. And I think you and I both would take Daniels over him.
Yep.
And I'll tell you what, if I traded down, Pete, and got more picks later in the first round for trading down, I wouldn't mind taking Bo Nix instead of Caleb. So, maybe that's just me, but I think Penix for that matter. I think there's a lot of good quarterback talent out there, and Caleb's just the one that everybody fell in love with. But this guy, Zach Wilson, that puts an exclamation point on a guy that everybody thought was the guy until he wasn't.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Well, thanks for joining us, folks. We are the Rebels Edge. Again, he is Pete Najarian over there, and I am John Najarian. We will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Check out marketrebellion.com/get started for more on the subscriptions as well as education. And we'll see you tomorrow at 1.